That was an arrangement of a Scottish piece called Dandy Dancer, and we played it on 4 equal instruments, 4 treble recorders. Our next piece, you'll hear that we play it on SATB, much like the vocal consort. It's a consort of 4 recorders. We thought this piece would work really well on our instruments because of the historical links between organ and recorder. It's one of our favourite pieces and one of our newest additions to our repertoire, Bach's Toccata and Fugue.
Our next piece is Ancorche col Partire by Cipriano de Rore, and it uses some of our biggest recorders, the great bass and the contrabass. Although these look very impressive and they sound very low, this is actually just in relation to the rest of the recorder family. They enable us to play at concert pitch, which is the same pitch as a vocal consort would sing the piece. Partway through, you'll hear Miriam playing some very intricate, faster passages, and these are called diminutions. This was a typical thing in Renaissance music and a way of decorating the melodic line.
Recorders in action, we thought now might be a good time to stop and introduce you to some members of our recorder family. This recorder may be familiar to some of you. This is the Descan, or the soprano recorder, which many of us have had experiences playing in primary schools in Britain. Since about World War II, this has been a popular instrument to learn in school. We call these instruments our Baroque consort because they're based on copies of instruments from the Baroque. But unlike a violin, which might survive till today and still make a really beautiful resonant sound, it's not really practical to play on actual Baroque recorders, because where we blow into them, they gather condensation and the wood often gets moist. So it doesn't survive in quite the same way as a stringed instrument. So these are just copies of Baroque, but we'll call them our Baroque consort for now. So this is the highest member of our Baroque consort. It makes a really nice high bright sound. And this is the treble or the alto voice in this consort. So we have the descant or the soprano voice and the treble or alto voice. And you can see these recorders look extremely similar in terms of their design. They're made of two separate woods, but the shape of them is very, very similar. The only difference being the treble is just that bit bigger, which means it makes a slightly lower sound. The next voice in this consort is the tenor. And this is mathematically twice the size of the descant recorder. So all of its proportions have been doubled, which means it produces a sound that is twice as low. All of our recorders in our collection work on this same mathematics. They either stem from the descant, doubling each time if they're a recorder in C, or they stem from the treble or alto, doubling each time if they're a recorder in F. So this is the tenor recorder. It makes a much deeper sound. Much richer in tone, I think, as well. And the last voice in our high Baroque consort is this one, the bass recorder. So we're starting to move into the recorders that have a bit more interesting shapes. This bass has been bent purely because it makes it slightly easier for us to play. The reach is much easier when it's bent to reach our mouths, whereas if it's straight, we have to adopt our playing position into something that's slightly less comfortable. This recorder also has a number of keys. This is purely to make the reach easier for the player. You can see that our little fingers would need to stretch all the way down to here from there, which would just be completely unrealistic. So the addition of keys just makes it easier for us to cover these holes. It also makes a much lower sound, and this recorder is related to the treble. So it's exactly twice the proportions of the treble or the alto voice. Now, as well as our Baroque consort, we're really lucky to be able to share with you a Renaissance consort as well. We have this in soprano, alto, tenor and bass too. I've just picked a few to show you today though. So this is our alto recorder, Renaissance and Baroque. There's a couple of key differences. Some are easier to spot than others. Of course, this recorder is much simpler in its design. It's been made from one piece of wood, and whilst this recorder comes apart into three pieces, this is just one single shape. At the bottom, if I zoom those in to show you, the bores are vastly different sizes. This is our Baroque and this is the Renaissance, and it being so much bigger and so much broader results in a much wider and louder sound. These instruments were more often played outside, so this is perhaps one of the reasons why they wanted them to be so much louder. As they became thinner, they created perhaps a more refined sound that would be better used in chamber music, theatres, that sort of thing. So that's why the differences sort of evolved as the purpose of music evolved in society as well. One other difference is right down the bottom here. You can see this recorder actually has two bottom holes. Our maker has kindly filled this in with wax for us. And this is just to give it the authentic Renaissance look, really, because this is before a time where it had been established whether you use your right hand, oh, this feels weird, or your left hand at the top. So the player could choose and then fill in whichever hole was going to be irrelevant to them. You can see also on this one, right down the bottom, I've got some double holes on my Baroque recorder down here. This helps us to create chromatic notes that are really in tune. And so that's the other difference between them, is that the Baroque recorder has a much more reliable chromatic range. It's not impossible to play those notes on these recorders, but it involves lots of shading of different partial holes and things like this. So it's not so easy to guarantee the tuning every time, whereas these Baroque recorders are more reliable in that sense. As the Renaissance recorders get bigger, they start to look a bit different too. So this is how our two basses compare. We've got our Renaissance bass, which if I just zoom up to be able to show you. Can't really fit it in one shot, unfortunately. This is also made from one piece of wood, and you can see that unlike the Baroque recorder, it hasn't been bent. So we do have to stretch to play this in a slightly different way. It also has far less keys than the Baroque recorder, simply because this is how they would have looked, and it's how they would have been played in a more simple way in the Renaissance times. Perhaps the most interesting thing about this recorder though is this lovely bit at the bottom. This is called the fontanelle. Often when we do education work, children will say to us, "Is that the sound box? Is that the speaker? I know that one." But no, it's not a sound box or a speaker. It's actually just here to protect the key work down here, which if you think in the Tudor times, this was actually quite a delicate piece of metal work. So they have this, we call it the fontanelle, and all it does is covers it up, and it looks pretty nice as well. This also makes a really deep sound. And a really big boomy sound as well compared to some of our modern instruments. There's two more members of the recorder family that I'm sure you spotted in the last video that I'll introduce you before we play our next piece. The first is the great bass recorder. So this is going back more to the Baroque designs, and it's the next size up from the normal bass that I've just shown you. You can see this recorder is a lot more angular. This is because the sheer size of it, it's twice the size of the tenor recorder in every proportion. It's just a little bit too much for 4 female players, if I'm honest. So we've got this bend in it to make it a lot more comfortable for us to play. You can see the key work too has had to become more extensive. That's just by necessity, really. There's no way that we would be able to stretch our hand span to reach these, but otherwise it is exactly the makeup of a regular recorder, if you like. We still have one single blown entry point here. There's no reed, even though it does look more reminiscent of perhaps a bassoon or something like that. And you can guess this one makes a really lovely low sound. Takes a lot of puff though. And finally, the recorder that I definitely think most people in our audiences have the most questions about is our biggest recorder. It's called the contrabass recorder, and it stands a little over 6 foot tall. You might have to bear with me with this one while I pick it up. You can see, well, luckily you could see the whole thing in the video that we've just played, because it's very difficult for me in my sitting room to be able to show you all of this on camera. But if I just lift it up as far as I can before I hit the ceiling, you can see here the key work has become more extensive again. And the main difference with this one, other than the sheer size and weight of it, is the presence of this. This is just a pipe. Often people will ask us, oh, okay, so is this one in the bassoon family? But no, it's still straight blown. It's a normal recorder mouthpiece that we've got on there. All this pipe does is simply carry the air up and into the top of the recorder, because you can imagine I'd need to play on a step ladder otherwise, which would make reaching the holes rather difficult. This recorder looks very impressive, but it doesn't make such a commanding sound as you might think. It's really, really soft sound. So we use this more to increase the depth of our consort. It lowers everything by another full octave rather than as a solo instrument. You see what I mean? It's a very, very peaceful sounding instrument. So this next piece that you're going to hear, we commissioned when we were young artists in residence at Sir John Smith Square. It's by an amazing British composer, Toby Young. We asked him, okay, please could you write us a piece that includes one of every size of recorder in our Baroque family under 3 minutes. So that's exactly what he did. It's called Recorder Revolution, and keep your eyes peeled because there's 1 or 2 instruments that we haven't met yet. So I'm sure you spotted there were two smaller members of the recorder family that I'd not introduced you to previously. That is the sopranino recorder and the Garkline recorder. These are two of my favourite instruments. The sopranino recorder is exactly half the size of the treble recorder, and so it makes a sound twice as high. It's often used in Baroque operas and things to represent little bird songs and things like that. This is my favourite recorder, and the wonder of a virtual concert is I can actually hold this up close enough for you to be able to see how the setup of this recorder is a little different. It's so small that you can see the finger holes have had to curve sort of around the edges, because if they were in a straight line, adult hands would just be too big for it. To put it in context, this is our descant recorder, which we previously considered to be pretty small. The Garkline is half the size of that. So it is a very small recorder. It's not as easy to play as you might think, because you have to really squish your fingers on the outside, and because it makes such a shrill noise, we only tend to use this one for special occasions. I can imagine my neighbours would get pretty fed up of me practicing that one every day pretty quickly. The next series of pieces is a dance suite from the Elizabethan era. It's made up of galliards and almains written by John Dowland and Anthony Holborn, and we call this set the Queen's Breakfast because Queen Elizabeth I was well known for her love of dancing, and in fact she would insist on dancing 7 galliards, which is a pretty sprightly dance involving hops and leaps and all kinds of pretty unqueenly movements. She'd dance 7 of those before she had her breakfast in a privy chamber every morning right into her 60s. So I just want to leave you with that image of an elderly queen hopping around to these as we play them. This is the Queen's Breakfast.
little moment of calm, and we'll also be switching to our Renaissance consort. Now, consort simply means a group of instruments of the same kind. That could be viols, it could be singers, or like it's the case with us, a group of recorders of the same type. You'll be able to spot that our Renaissance consort looks slightly different to our Baroque consort. Most of the instruments are in one piece, they've got a different shape, and they also have a different sound. The piece you're going to hear is composed by John Taverner, and it's called In Nomine. Now, in nomines were really popular during the Renaissance period. They would usually be written for 4 or 5 voices with one really special voice in the middle. That voice would have the main melody line, but super slowed down. See if you can spot it whilst we play.
As a group, we've been so lucky to travel all over the world, and we really are starting to miss all our adventures. And in fact, our last tour together was almost a year ago in Scotland, where we saw some beautiful scenery and played in gorgeous places and met amazing people. And it's hard to believe that it's been almost a year. As part of Emerging, a European ensemble scheme, we've also had the opportunity to travel to loads of different places, including Greece. Not too long ago, it was December 2019, forgetting all my years. And yeah, we really enjoy finding new music and exploring new music and getting to put our own stamp on music from these different places and these different countries. So the next 2 pieces you're going to hear are from Greece, 2 traditional folk tunes, the Mandilatos and the Orma Fulia. I think that's how you say it. And these originated back in the Middle Ages when Greece was part of the Ottoman Empire.
Thank you very much for joining us for our concert today, and thank you to the Tunnell Trust, which continues to support young musicians during this difficult time. We're going to finish our concert in the way that we began, with a piece for 4 recorders of the same pitch, this time with a magical theme. We loved touring our concert programme, Double Double Toil and Trouble, in our Tunnell Trust tour of Scotland last year. It's a concert programme that tells the story of how music and magic have been connected throughout history. And we're looking forward to making some exciting announcements about our plans for this in the next few months. If you'd like to keep in touch with Palisander and find out more about that programme and other things, you can join our mailing list on our website, or you can follow us on all the different social media platforms, including Facebook. This is music from the Harry Potter films, arranged for Palisander by Miriam.